In today's video, we're discussing some NHL trade rumors, which comes from Elliot Friedman and Chris Johnston on this recent edition of Saturday Headlines on Hockey Night in Canada, as well as Bruce Garrick's Sunday rumor roundup on the Ottawa Sun. We're looking at teams like the Leafs, the Habs, the Senators, the Wild, the Panthers, and more. We'll jump into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now I have a lot I want to cover today, so let's jump right in and get started. I want to start off with a few things here from Saturday Headlines on Hockey Night in Canada with Elliot Friedman and Chris Johnston. Now first of all, they were discussing the contract extension that's likely coming for Maple Leafs defenseman Jake Muzzin. Likely could be delayed a little bit here until after March the 1st. Now there were a lot of talks and rumblings that Muzzin and his camp, as well as Kyle Dubas and the Leafs, have been having a lot of conversations and that they were closing in on a contract extension. It could be announced pretty much anytime. Now it's believed to be likely a 4 to 5 year deal, somewhere around $5.5 million approximately. The one drawback that is likely going to delay this is a snag in his CBA, where teams are only allowed to commit so much salary for the following season, but after March the 1st, that amount increases by 10%, which will free up the logistics here that they need to make this official. It kind of sounds like they pretty much have a done deal. They just can't sign off on it and make it official until after March the 1st. So that will certainly take one pending UFA off the Leafs list for next season. And even though this contract isn't expected to be done until past the trade deadline, there really is no likely chance here at all that the Maple Leafs try to trade Muzzin. They could possibly move another defender. I think if they did, it would be Cody Ceci. He'd be the ideal one, but he's also injured right now, which could cause teams to not be interested as well, especially where he's hurt, he's a pending UFA. That certainly could complicate things, and Ceci may not be able to return until the postseason as well. So that could make things complicated there, but a deal for Muzzin is likely coming, but it's likely going to be until after March the 1st before we actually get anything officially announced. Now, the other big name that came up on Saturday Headlines was Florida Panthers center iceman Vincent Trocheck. Now, the Florida Panthers, for the most part, have been battling for a playoff spot. They certainly were in contention at one point for a top three. Certainly more likely for a wild card spot right now, but even that is not a guarantee at this time. We very well could see a case where there could be 5 Metro teams make it and only 3 Atlantic, depending on how the Panthers do down the stretch. The Montreal Canadiens are certainly not out of the mix here as well, but they certainly have a bigger mountain to climb to get themselves in the picture. So I guess we'll see what happens, but there's been no secret that the Panthers are looking for help on the blue line. They've been looking for somebody who likely can play a top pairing type of minute with Aaron Ekblad. They've been dangling Mike Matheson a little bit on the blue line, possibly to swap D for D, but that really hasn't worked out. As of right now, there's been some talk that maybe a pending UFA like a Mike Hoffman or Dodonov or something like that, who may very well may not be able to return. They probably can't bring back both those wingers, that one of them could be traded to bring in a solid defenseman, somebody ideally with term. But with the Panthers being in the playoff mix here, it just seemed a little bit more unlikely. But now they're struggling, and they might not even make the playoffs. It's not a guarantee. And if they do accept the fact that they might have to be sellers at the deadline, Trocheck's name is something that Elliot Friedman believes very well could be moved. I mean, he still has term in his contract. Trocheck has 2 more years at $4.75 million, so it's not a crazy amount. And really, in the past, Trocheck's been an excellent player. Even though he hasn't had the best season this year, overall, I think he's a pretty solid center iceman. And really, there probably would be a lot of teams interested, I would think, to acquire, especially somebody looking for maybe like a solid number 2 center iceman or something to that effect. Like, for example, a team that certainly comes to mind is Minnesota, who we're going to touch on here later in the video as well. But they clearly are looking for help at center. They have some D they might be able to move. That very well could land 2 possible teams together to make a potential trade. At least that makes sense, from what each team is looking for. But I was a little bit surprised to hear Trocheck's name out there. It's not a name we've really heard from NHL insiders so far. The main name on the Panthers that have been mentioned before was Mike Hoffman. So I guess we will see, but I mean, Hoffman's been a top goal scorer, really produced well for the Panthers. If they want to have any hope of re-signing him or even getting Dodonov, then clearly they're going to have to move some money out anyways. So it very well might make more sense as well to move a player with term who might have a little bit more value, to bring in a top defenseman and play with Ekblad, and then at the same time have more salary cap space to possibly, re-sign one of these guys, depending, of course, on who the D is that comes in and what they're making. That could complicate things as well. But either way, the Panthers have been struggling, and Trocheck apparently is on the trade block. Now, there's also further updates here as well in a couple of different columns on aging veteran Joe Thornton and the San Jose Sharks. Now, Bruce Garriock touches on this in his latest Sunday column for the Ottawa Sun, and has also been mentioned as well by Adrian Dater of Colorado Hockey Now, who writes for the Avalanche. Garriock believes that the San Jose Sharks definitely will be moving defenseman Brendan Dillon. That's all but a certainty, just a matter of where he goes and exactly what the return will be. The Sharks continue to get more bad news recently to make the things even worse, which could actually help them fall further in the standings as well. Erik Karlsson has a broken thumb and will be out for the remainder of the year. So if things weren't already bad enough with guys like Thomas Hertl out of the lineup, now Karlsson's gone too. We saw Evander Kane get suspended, so he's out for a few games. They're really depleted in San Jose, and things have gone from bad to worse. So will a veteran like Joe Thornton, who has full no trade clause, potentially accept a trade to go on to a contending team and try to get that elusive Stanley Cup that has evaded him his entire NHL career? Now, one team that's come up here that really hasn't been mentioned too much in the past was the Colorado Avalanche as a potential suitor for Thornton's services. Of course, there's also both of these columns as well. Both reference the fact that neither would be surprised if he did return to where it all started in the Boston Bruins organization and potentially take a run at a cup with Boston. But of course, one thing though with Colorado that's going to drive these things is that obviously Nazem Kadri is going to be out for an extended period of time. They could use some help at center, so Thornton certainly fits that bill. He's got a lot of experience, leadership, who can also help with a lot of the younger, Avalanche forwards. They likely would part with a player like Kamenev, who's been looking for more playing time, more opportunity, so he might be able to get more of a role in San Jose. So that very well might be a decent swap there between the Avalanche and Sharks should they potentially hook up on a trade. Not really sure what Boston would be offering to the Sharks in return for Thornton, but I think ultimately it's going to boil down to what Thornton wants to do. I'm not sure Doug Wilson's going to be, obviously he's going to want to get a return, but it's going to be more about helping Thornton go to what situation works best for him and see what happens here on a potential playoff run. But the Avalanche were also rumored to be in on Blake Coleman before he ended up getting traded to the Tampa Bay Lightning, so it does seem apparent that they're definitely in the market for looking for help and an extra forward as well. So I do think Thornton would make sense. So we'll see what happens here ahead of the deadline. And of course, Bruce Garriock goes on to talk in his Sunday column a lot about the Ottawa Senators. One player he mentions he feels will be likely traded almost for sure would be defenseman Dylan DeMelo. Now, DeMelo's had a pretty nice season in Ottawa, considering that they really haven't had a great year as a team. He's had a pretty decent season. Obviously, he's in a contract year. He's a pending UFA. He's one of the pieces that came over from the Sharks in the Erik Karlsson trade. And definitely right now, the Ottawa Senators have a lot of younger defensemen who are certainly looking to get more of a bigger role with the team. They just got Christopher Landon back from injury. He's likely going to play out the rest of the year in Belleville. He might get a couple of games with the Sens to NHL level before the end of the year. Besides Landon, they've got Eric Brandstrom down there as well. They still have Max Lajoie as well, who did have pretty much a full-time year 2 seasons back. He could get another look going into next year. They likely will re-sign veteran defenseman Mark Borowiecki, I would think as well. And you throw in like guys like Shabbat, Ron Hainsey, who might stick around, and that kind of creates, not much of a role for DeMelo, in my opinion. It does make sense that he very well could be traded along. I don't think he's going to bring back a big return. I'm guessing probably a mid-level pick, maybe second to third round pick, maybe a prospect. Hard to say, but the Senators are loaded with both of those things, so it's not really sure what they would prefer in that regard. And of course, he did mention as well an update on Jean-Gabriel Pageau, the fact that he doesn't feel that if he is traded that he will still garner a first-round pick, but I almost disagree with that. After seeing the Blake Coleman trade with the Devils and the Lightning and what the Lightning gave up, that was quite a big haul for the Devils for Coleman. Now, of course, the one difference here you got to keep in mind, though, is that Blake Coleman is not a rental player. He had 1 year left on his contract at 1.8. He's having a good season, so it's a bargain contract with a little bit of term on it. In Pageau's case, he's a rental player, so I do expect the return to be a little bit less, but the Devils got a first-round pick and a really solid A-level prospect in Nolan Foote, in my opinion. So clearly, why couldn't the Senators get at least one of those two, being a first-round pick or a high-level prospect as well? So personally, Pageau could end up being the top really forward on the trade market by the time we hit the deadline, if Chris Kreider of the Rangers, for example, isn't traded, which is not quite clear how that's going to go yet. And of course, Pageau at the very least could probably be the top center iceman, who generally do garner a little bit more of a return as well. So personally, I think he should fetch a first-round pick for the Senators, and if he doesn't, I would really think long and hard about re-signing him and keeping him in the fold as a veteran guy who could certainly help along with this rebuild on a lot of these younger players and be, a good role model to have around. He's a hardworking player. He's from the local area, and I do think he could fit in with their rebuild if he decides that he'd like to be part of it as well. Now, lastly here, I want to touch on the Minnesota Wild and the Montreal Canadiens and a little bit further conversation on the trade rumors that have come up, mostly from Michael Russo of The Athletic, who covers the Wild, indicating that the Montreal Canadiens actually could look to move forward Max Domi. Now, there's been another article on the Journal de Montréal from Marc Devois indicating that he feels that guys like Jeff Petrie and Thomas Tatar will not be going anywheres, that it's a decision's already been made and some time ago at that those two veteran guys, even though they have a little term on their contract, will not be moved and will be part of the team moving forward. But even he felt as well that there was a possibility they could look to move Max Domi. Of course, Domi's going to need a new contract. Of course, last year was a tremendous year for him. His numbers are down this year, and it's not quite clear what Bergevin intends to do. Does he want to re-sign him? It depends on what Domi is looking for, or could he trade him to really help their blue line? I know there's been a lot of talk about Shea Weber, and right now things certainly look a little bit more positive than a lot of the rumors that were going around in the beginning when the injury was first taking place, before they had a full diagnosis and update on the longtime veteran defenseman there. But clearly they could use some help on the blue line, I think, longer term as well. And if Domi could fetch that, I do think they should at least consider that. Now, the rumors have been that they're really interested in a couple defenders on the Wild, primarily Matt Dumba and Jonas Brodin. Now, they're both a little bit different defensemen. Dumba's going to give you more offense, where Brodin's a little bit better defensively. They're both fairly young, 25, 26 years old. They both have a little bit of term on their contract left as well. Dumba's got 3 years at $6 million. Brodin's got another year just over 4. So there's different, kind of concepts going through on what they could do depending on what you prefer to have on your blue line. But of course, the Habs are also going to have a younger defenseman like Alex Romanov, hopefully coming over to the NHL soon as well. You don't really want to box him out too much, but still, that's the rumor, is that those are the guys that they're looking at, and that Domi could be moved to the Wild in exchange for one of those guys. Personally, if I'm going to trade Domi, I'm probably going for more of a player like Dumba, but I guess we'll see. Bill Guerin has made it known, the GM of the Wild, that he wants help at center, that he either wants a number one center for one of these defensemen, or maybe somebody who could be more of a second-line center with something with it, maybe a prospect or draft pick or another roster player or something. It had to be an additional piece added to the deal. And Max Domi, I'm not really sure we can call him a solid number one center. Last year he played like it at times, but most places would probably consider him to be more like a solid number two center. But right now in the Wild, he could certainly play, first or second line. So it's debatable on how they would view that. But either way, whether it be Domi for Dumba or Domi and something else, or regardless, either way, it's a deal that's being discussed here. And multiple sources now do believe there's something to it. And the talks have been, possibly going on. So I guess we'll see what happens. No guarantee that the Montreal Canadiens sell off anybody, including Max Domi. I don't think that's a foregone conclusion. But I do think it is likely that Bergevin is looking at options like the Wild defenseman, just a matter of what the price tag will be and if he feels that's the right move. But until some of these contracts get sorted out on guys like Max Domi, it's certainly debatable on how they proceed. So I guess we'll see. Clearly the Habs are going to have an uphill battle to get into the playoffs this year, and they very well could sell off a few pieces as they look to bounce back and kind of restart next year fresh and hopefully have better luck injury-wise, because that certainly has had a big impact on their season as well. So, of course, as always, I want to know your thoughts and opinions and everything discussed here today. What other deals do you think we will see? We saw a good flurry of activity yesterday. Could we see more deals now? Or do you think teams will kind of be a little bit more patient here and wait till closer to the 24th deadline? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and check out our channel membership options as well. Lots of great perks in there and different ways to support Top Shelf Hockey, and I'd certainly appreciate it if you consider checking it out. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.